Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Lee. I work at Protocol Labs. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about user adoption and how that works for the decentralized web. So we exist to improve upon how the internet works. And our focus is on the fundamental layers, the protocols of the decentralized web stack. But in order to build a protocol with broad and lasting impact, we at Protocol Labs, as well as anyone else building decentralized web technologies, need to understand how people use it or not at every layer, right? So that includes how protocols in the middle are used by developers to build services and applications, and then how those services in the middle are used by developers to build additional applications on top of that for individuals or organizations or the end users. And so my goal 19 minutes from now is that no matter who your users are, you leave with better frameworks to think about how they choose decentralized technologies and grow your usage of your project or application or system or service, right? So let's start at the beginning. As it turns out, how people choose decentralized technologies is actually a subset of a more general problem, how people choose things. So let's start with a really simple example, buying a bicycle. So you might think it works like this. You decide you want a bike, and then you go to a bike shop, and then you try out 3 of the bikes that you have, and then you buy the one that you like the best. But has anyone in this room bought a bike or thought about buying a bike in the last 2 years? Has anyone gone through that process? Oh, wow, lots. Okay, so this might look kind of ridiculous because actually the process looks a little more like that. Does that look familiar? Okay. Wow, those bikes are going a lot faster than my subway. Maybe I want a bike. Hey, does that person bike? Can I ask them for their opinion? And then I go to 3 different brands' websites, and they each have 17 models. So I read 18 different specs, and I'm like right where I started before. And I might go test ride some bikes, and this one's really too heavy because I have to carry it up the stairs. But this one's too light and fancy because I need to lock it up on the streets of San Francisco. And so, you know what? I'll just try again next summer. This is how you lose your users. And don't worry, because let's switch now to looking at a similar path for a decentralized web protocol. All right, so you might think like, hey, I want a decentralized chat application, then I search for an app and download an app, right, and use it. But we know by now that it doesn't work this way. It works like this. You might hear about it at a meetup and think, oh, that sounds crazy, but kind of weird. And then you go to another event and hear some more talks about it and realize, oh, this technology is really interesting. You might download it on your own machine, try it out, but then like go back to everything else you were doing and forget about it for a while. But then maybe you come across a really helpful blog post, and then you might ask live peer about their experience using this technology. And you hear good things and you hear bad things and decide, all right, well, I still want to try it out, so let me try it in a branch. And then you run into some hurdles, but figure it out with some help on the forums. And then finally, maybe 18 months after you first heard about it, you're actually using this technology. So this looks pretty insane. But that's okay. I'm here to help. I'm here to share that there is a framework for making a little bit of sense out of this jumble, and it's called the adoption funnel. This is a practice copied from other fields, and you can break it up into different stages. For here, I'm splitting it into awareness, interest, evaluation, and adoption. And actually, at every stage of the funnel, some people realize this is not for them, or they get very frustrated. And so, at each stage, it gets a little bit smaller. And so, it's only at the end that your users are finding success. So let's take a look at each of these stages. The first 2 are very similar for applications versus protocols and services. The third is going to be really different. So the most interesting about awareness is that the defining trait is people haven't gotten to your website yet. They've never heard about you, so they cannot search for your name on Google. They cannot go to your App Store download page. And so you need to reach outside your website, your GitHub, your IRC to get to them. So if you want to grow awareness, think about how we all learn about new technologies or new projects. We might go to talks, we go to online forums, we talk to our friends, we read blog posts, news. And so these are the sources, like if you call them attack vectors, these are the vectors by which we can grow awareness. And we can use website mentions or Hacker News points or Twitter followers, basically measuring all of the points of contact that are outside our own project to grow awareness. All right, the next one I call interest, and this is the stage where people are interested and they want to know a little bit more. This is when, if you think back to the analogy I was giving, when people are going to your website and reading specs or reading documentation, right? So they're checking out your stuff now, which means you can, if you want to measure this, you can use your metrics. What web traffic goes to your website? What traffic goes to your documentation site? How many people are starring your GitHub repo? How many people are installing your applications? What's its rank in the application store? And the attack vectors for the interest stage of the funnel are things like case studies, app store listings, making sure that the screenshots really illustrate what's happening or what the advantages or what people can accomplish by using your project. The other major one that I hear is that that people are looking for to understand what the benefit of this technology or the project is, and a little bit less about how it works at this point in time. That can come later. All right, so now let's look at evaluation. So evaluating applications is still pretty simple. If I'm looking at, let's say, Textile, which is a mobile photo sharing app, or anything else that is only for one user, just for me. So I can check it out, I can install it, I can try it, I probably make an account. The metrics are pretty straightforward. You can borrow a lot from the centralized web. Its number of accounts created is a pretty straightforward one. App installs. And then where you can influence this is making the account creation process really streamlined and easy. Maybe making the onboarding process, so you explain what your application does, really beautiful and make users and testers fall in love. And similarly with the listing or the website of your project. But let's switch to services. So remember this crazy diagram of steps? It actually gets worse. So imagine if instead of getting a bike, you were getting a pet. And the constellation increases, right? Because you have to convince maybe your partner. Let's say I'm thinking, I think I want a dog. I have to convince my partner, my family, everyone who lives with me. I've got a lot of other stakeholders. I've got to convince my landlord. And if any one of them say no, I have to go back to the drawing board. And so that's that blob up there. And then over on the right side, you have to think about maintenance. Who's going to walk this dog? Who's going to feed it? What's going to happen when I need to go to a conference for a week or 3 weeks? So that's maintenance and compatibility. And you can imagine that when we think about web services or libraries or protocols we choose, we have all these additional trade-offs as well. So it's a lot more complex than an application that a single user has to choose. So when it comes to evaluation for services and protocols, it's a little bit less of like, is it beautiful and do I like it? And a little more of, okay, it's interesting, but is it going to solve the problem for me? And just to repeat, the number of stakeholders grows exponentially. And the timeline of this decision-making is usually a little bit longer too. So the attack vectors for evaluation stage are things like documentation or guides or overviews. The number one piece of feedback that we hear is is that project produced really good documentation explaining how it works, how an individual system works, its individual components, but they really struggle to understand how they all fit together or how it's going to tie in with the other technology that they've already chosen or how to integrate it with other parts of the stack that they might be exploring. So if you're a service or protocol developer, that is my one wish to you. All right, so we've got 3 takeaways on user adoption, right? The first one is that a user's journey to your stuff is very rarely linear. Instead, it looks like a hot mess. But number 2, you can divide and conquer it into 4 phases. And then third is that evaluation stage is really different whether you're building applications or you're building services and protocols. And the latter have a lot more stakeholders, more maintenance considerations than applications. And that's where it's really important to spend our time if we're building those types of things, those parts of the decentralized web layer. All right, so that was all the things that I know. That was all the things that are well studied and have lots of evidence. And I want to talk a little bit about a question that we don't know yet. Because right now, today, almost everyone in the room here, we're engaged in the building of the new fabric of the internet, right? But after building comes adoption. If we want this to have the impact and the longevity and the revolution that we're seeking, we need to think about how this is going to grow. So let's look at a few case studies of how things have grown in the past. Airplanes were invented by the Wright brothers in 1903, but they didn't get popularized. Commercial air travel was popularized in the 1950s. So that's about 50 years. Here's a very different example. Signal was created in 2013, grew very rapidly, especially in countries with oppressive regimes, reached 100 million users in 2016, and I think they're at about 200 million now. So that was a 3-year time frame from creation to what we'd call pretty mainstream usage. HTTP was created in 1990. It was supported in a lot of different places by 1993. This definition is a little bit blurrier, but let's call that 4 years. HTTPS was created basically the same time, 1993, and it was mainstreamed in 2018. So that's 24 years, and we only just last month reached a tipping point where 50% of the web is served on HTTPS. So that's a really long time. And the last example we'll talk about is IPv6, which was created in 1996, and it's still at 25% adoption, and no one's really sure when we're going to get to full adoption 22 years later. All right, so what's going on here? Because we have a wide range of technologies and adoption life cycles going from 3 years all the way to 50 years to completely unknown, right? I think one interesting thing here to note a pattern is that airplanes and IPv6 in particular, those are networks. And networks have a couple more hurdles when it comes to adoption than applications or even protocols. Networks need critical mass for it to be healthy and compelling. Networks also have this struggle, especially with HTTPS and IPv6, of requiring backwards compatibility. And those hurdles make it a little more challenging for those transitions to take place, for the adoptions to take place. But I believe that they're put in place because you want a relatively smooth upgrade path and you want to be able to reach everyone. But here's a question we could ask ourselves. What if we don't want to have backwards compatibility with Web 2? How fast could we move there? Is that a worthwhile trade-off? Meanwhile, with applications, let's hustle, because you can get broad adoption of decentralized applications or brand new applications in less than 3 years. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And those are questions that I don't think we have the answers to yet. How quickly will the decentralized web be adopted this time around? How quickly can we produce protocols, networks, and applications that take advantage of all of these new inventions and new research going on? If you want to talk about that more, we love those kinds of conversations here at Protocol Labs. We'll be here all day at Lab Day. I'm Michelle Lee. I'm Mishmash on Twitter, and we have a lot of other team members here as well. Thank you.